Hey, hello friends. Today we're going to make a React application that's going to call the API we made the other day using Spring Boot. So I have a few things up and running already. Here is the application we made. Big thing to note, we added this @cross-origin annotation to our controller. This is going to prevent the CORS error we'll get from our React application. Then we have our database already connected. You can see here that there's no information in it, and I already have a React application being hosted locally. And we can just go ahead and verify that, throw in an h1, hello world, and there we go. So let's dive in here. We're going to need two folders, one for our components, well, component rather, and then for our types, but again, we're just going to make one. And let's go ahead and start there with our types. So we are going to just call it types.tsx. And we're going to export our type Space Marine, which is going to match the object that we made, or the class rather, in Java. So it's going to have an ID, which in JavaScript is a number. It's going to have a name, which is a string. It's going to have a faction, which is a string. And then it's going to have a Boolean for our loyalty check. There we go. We're going to have an issue with this, but we'll come right back to that. And then in here, we're going to make our component. So actually, we're going to call it create space marine.tsx. And then let's get some of our imports in here and use state from React. And we'll need our type. So import space marine from types. It doesn't like my file extensions for some reason. .tsx. There we go. So our components create Space Marine is going to have a few variables that we want to handle. It's going to have an input for a name. It's going to have it's going to have an input for our faction. It's going to have an input for our Boolean loyal, and then we just want some kind of feedback for the user. So we'll just call that feedback, set feedback, and then these are all going to be using use state, of course. This is going to be a string, and we'll just initialize it with that. And then the only one we need to change is this one. We're going to change that to a Boolean. And this is a design decision here. I'm just going to set it to true by default. We could do some @null kind of stuff, or null kind of stuff. But for now, we're just going to leave it like that. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use that information to put together our Space Marine. So our new Space Marine of type Space Marine is going to equal the name, the faction, and the loyalty. Now, of course, we have an issue here because it is yelling at me because I don't have the ID, and I don't want to put the ID. We have that in our backend being auto-generated, so we don't need that. Well, here, I'll show you real quick, blah, blah, blah. With this, we're auto-generating an ID, so we're not going to ask the user to give us that. That's something that we need to provide for them. But of course, with the type, that's causing an issue. So you could make this optional, and you can see that went green. That's fine now. But that's a bad idea, because then in the future, when we want to actually retrieve a Space Marine from the database, if it doesn't have an ID, that's going to be fine, which is ridiculous. It needs to have an ID. So what I've been doing is just creating two types, one for when we create a Space Marine, and then one for retrieving or representing the actual Space Marine, which is going to represent, or is going to be, create Space Marine type and the ID number. So we won't use this today, but in the future we'll probably use this. And now we just need to change this to create Space Marine type and create Space Marine type. There we go. Alright, so those are the pieces we need to go ahead and make our Space Marine. And eventually, what we're going to do is we are going to show the user these inputs, and then there's going to be a button for them to click after they put in the name and all the other information. And once they click on that button, it's going to fire off this method that we're about to make, which we will call handle submit, and the button will just say create. So let's go ahead and code that up. Our const handle submit is going to be an API call. We're just going to use the fetch API to go ahead and do that. And first we put in the API endpoint, which is HTTP, just localhost 8000, and our endpoint is create. This we did last time. You can go ahead and check that out if you'd like. Boom. And then we just need some boilerplate stuff here. So we need the method, which is just post method. Then we need some headers, which is just going to be content, what is that, type, whoops, and that is application.json. On my Mac, this just auto-completes, which is a lot more convenient, but this is some boilerplate that we have to go through. And then we want to pass it the body. This is where it's going to get the information for the Space Marine. And that's just going to contain our, that's just going to contain the new Space Marine we just made, but we want to stringify that like so. So that's going to put that information into the body of our post request. Cool. So now let's go ahead and get some of these results. We want our response here, and we just want to check that this response is okay. So if the response is not okay, well, that means we have some kind of error, and we're just going to go ahead and log that. So unable to complete request. But if it does go through, cool, we are just going to return the response.json. We're going to get that data back. We're going to get whatever data the server sends back to us. Then finally, we can do something with that data. And I mean, we don't really need to do anything, but we want to give the user some kind of feedback. So this is where we will set feedback to equal Space Marine created. We'll give them the ID with ID, data.id. That's going to be in the HTTP response we get from the server. And then also, we just want to go ahead and reinitialize all these. That's just kind of like additional feedback for the user, right? It sees that something happened when those get cleared. We don't really need this. I'm just going to keep it to whatever the user already set it to. So that's not really necessary, but whatever, we'll keep it there. Perfect. And then finally, we will just catch any server-side errors here. And we'll again put that in the feedback just to let them know. Set feedback, just error. And then we'll give them the error.message. Where's my $sign? There we go. Error.message. Boom. Okay, that should be everything we know, or everything we need to go ahead and fire off that API call and then get our information back. So now let's set up the actual the actual entry point, the actual UI for the user. So we're going to put everything in a div. I think that should be fine there. And the first one, we're going to have inputs. Whoops. Do a self-closing one. Actually, let's do a little different. Let's put it inside of a label. I keep doing that, sorry. Let's put it inside of a label. The label is going to be name, and then inside of that we'll have an input. And the first thing we need is, okay, the name, what kind of type is this? That's just a text. Then we need to know what is the value, what's being put in here. That's going to be our name. And then finally, we need to handle our state. So on change, we have the events. We want to set name to e.target.value. There we go. Boom. So we can go ahead and copy paste this div for our faction, and then for our Boolean for our loyalty, which will be a little different. But first, let's do this faction, change that to faction, change this to faction, change this to set faction. And then this last one is just a little different. It's not going to be of type text. It's going to be a checkbox. If it's checked, they're loyal. If it's unchecked, they're not loyal. And the value is going to be loyal. And then finally e.target.checked. And I messed something up here, which we're going to need to find out what we did here. Oh, it's not value. We want to do checked. Yeah, there we go. And finally, we're going to have, oops, and right, I'm trying to set a Boolean to a string. That's not going to work. Set loyal, e.target.checked. So there we go. That should be everything we need right here. Am I missing anything? I don't think so. Maybe we can put like an H1 at the top here. Say something like create space marine. I think this should be pretty good to go. Well, let's find out. So we go into our app component right here, and let's go ahead and import our create space marine components. Create space marine from, and then where is this going to be? This is going to be in components / create space marine.tsx. Boom. And we'll go ahead and put that right in here. Create space marine. And then let's go ahead and check. Oh, we have problems. Was not found. Oh, so I didn't export it in my component. So at the bottom here, I have this, I have all this code, but I'm not really doing anything with it. So I need to export it. So export default create space marine. And that should fix it. There we go. So obviously this isn't very pretty. I'm not doing any styling today. Maybe in the future we can style this up. But for now, yeah, this is what it looks like. I think if I put well, it doesn't matter. We're not going to waste time here. So again, let's go ahead and look at our database. We have nothing in here, and hopefully this is going to work. So just like last time, we're going to put myself in. My name is Adrian. Whoops. My name is Adrian. My faction is going to be Buckeyes. I am going to be loyal. We're going to create. Oh, and I didn't put the feedback in either. But I'm pretty sure that worked just because it cleared all this. And if we remember, we put right in here when we get our data back. So it passed through here. The response was okay. And then it got to here, so it set all this. But set feedback, I never actually put that in anywhere. So we'll do that in a second. Let's go ahead and check here. Boom. There I am. So now we've connected our front end to our back end. And then finally, let's just go ahead and put this in here. We are going to put a little shorthand feedback, and we'll just do a P feedback. Cool. So this is just like an implicit if statement. So it's saying if there is feedback, it's going to add this HTML right here, and we're going to pull that value feedback. So now we should have, oh, and it worked automatically. That's pretty cool. Space Marine created with ID 1. Let's go ahead and just re-render all this. There's nothing, and if I gave it, well, let's just do like we did last time. Then we have Jimmy. He is in the faction Wolverines, and he is not loyal. We'll go ahead and create this. Boom. Space Marine created with ID 2. We can go ahead and double check that. And there it is. So that's as quickly as I can throw this together. That is our React front end that is now connecting with our Spring Boot API that we made the other day. So maybe we'll do some styling in the future, but I don't know. I definitely want to do a few more things. Like I want to add an API endpoint for retrieving the Space Marines that we've made, and then obviously a React component to display that. So we will pick that up some other day. But for now, thank you guys very, very much. Have a good day. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.